Harry Potter and the Cursed Child has been casting a spell on Broadway for the past 8 years, and today we're talking with Daniel Fredrick from this production. Thank you so much for being here, Daniel.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian.
So you're stepping into a world that is so beloved by so many and has really taken on a life of its own. What is it like to step into the world of Harry Potter in such a big way?
It's been amazing. It's been such a ride over the last it'll be 3 years this fall, and you get to bring a chapter of the story that people don't know to life, and they get to meet or re-meet characters who they grew up with oftentimes, or who they're just getting to know, and so it's very special to be able to like bring some familiarity and some comfort, and also hopefully some surprises and some fun and joy.
Were you kind of familiar with Harry Potter? I know it's everywhere. But I know I grew up on it. I'm sure you probably grew up with it in some way. But were you familiar with the story before being in the role?
Yeah, very, very. I had seen the show, the original cast in London, when it was a 2-part experience. Incredible. Yeah, and we saw the show. We were told by the box office that we were sitting in J.K. Rowling seats, which she has for every performance. She had for every performance at that theater, and no idea if it was true or not, but they were very good seats.
That's awesome. And then, so when you're kind of entering into a role such as Ron Weasley, with there being so many years of the books and the movies, and also the show as well on Broadway or across the world, how do you kind of balance what has already been kind of established about him while also kind of making him your own character?
Yeah, I don't worry too much about the movies, because I feel like people are just gonna like copy paste a lot of that stuff, and that just like you just kind of take care of that. That part just kind of takes care of itself. I find there's one moment, one small line where I do kind of try to give people the full Rupert Grint experience.
Sure.
But other than that, I just sort of trust the fact that I grew up with the books. I started reading them when I was the same age the characters were, 10, 11 years old, and grew up with that. And so I know the story really well, and have for many years, and it's meant so much to me for many years. And so I trust the fact that since my childhood, I've known like who these people are and how they connect with each other and how they relate to each other. And so to be able to trust my impression of that and just go like, all right, well, this is sort of the script does such a beautiful job of laying out who they are as adults. And so you get to kind of take that and add to it if I feel there's anything that needs adding. But largely it's like, to me, it's pretty clear the guy's pretty vivid on the page. And so you get to just be like, all right, here's somebody who he loves his family, he loves his friends, he's like steady Eddie, a lot of his anxieties and kind of what have you, his angst from when he was a kid have kind of gone. He's chilled out a little bit in fatherhood, and so you get to just ride with that.
It's kind of cool getting to see such a character like this so many years later, because it's 19 years after like the epilogue of the stories that you're kind of seeing them in that world. What do you feel like is maybe the biggest difference between Ron in those earlier adventures that he had and in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child?
I think when he was a kid, there were so many instances of where he felt like frustrated or sad or resentful at kind of feeling like second or even third banana to Harry and Hermione, and as an adult you just don't feel that, you just don't experience that. You're like, yeah, man, this guy's like very comfortable with who he is and his place in the world. He used to be an Auror, is not anymore, and so clearly he was like, yeah, man, that's like it is what it is. I'm ready to just be a dad and put in a couple hours a week at the joke shop.
I love that too, because you do think about Harry and Ron always kind of being like a pair when it comes to like, they're going to go to be Aurors together. They're going to kind of do this all together. The three of them kind of exist in this world of moving as like a trio. Even though Harry's name is kind of on the books and stuff, it really truly is about the three of them.
Yeah.
And just see him kind of accept who he is and be something like, he's not trying to be something that he's not anymore. He's firmly okay with who he is.
That's exactly right. And I think he's just like, his wife is in this job that's very demanding, very kind of high status, high stress, all that kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah, man, I get to like bring a little bit of balance to that. And so I think that would be, to me, that's the biggest difference is there's all those anxieties in those moments where he as a kid would get so keyed up because he was like, what does Hermione think about me? What does Harry think about me? What's going on here? It just feels like age has kind of chilled him out a little bit. And I certainly relate to that.
And it seems like, too, also in Cursed Child, he also brings a lot of levity in a lot of the situations. This is sometimes a little bit
Yeah.
of a dark story. You're dealing with some conversations of like what happens when you change the future in lives and stuff like that. How do you feel like what is it to kind of step into a role where you are bringing levity in a show that can sometimes be a little dark or heavy?
Well, it's great because I think for the most part, people are eager for those moments in the way that if you're watching like a Shakespearean tragedy, you need a
Sure.
little bit of a pressure valve release. And that's how Shakespeare's tragedies are structured. It's a lot how Cursed Child is structured, where you'll have something kind of upsetting or challenging or sad or scary happen, and then you'll get somebody. It's a lot of times it's Ron, sometimes it's Moaning Myrtle. Like it's somebody will kind of come on and try and lighten things up a little bit. And yeah, I mean it's great because the audience those are welcome moments for them. In
Sure.
addition to, because when you're taking in the difficult things that are said and done and seen in the play, you need a balanced diet, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's also challenging because you do kind of go like, well, look, hey, there's a lot of lovely stuff that Ron brings to the play, but mostly he's here to get some chuckles, and so you better get them.
You mentioned that you've been in this role for 3 years, correct?
Like 2.5 now, yeah.
Sure. Are you still learning things about this character? All that many years later?
I'm still learning things about how I can best kind of present or like inhabit
Sure.
him and like show him off to best effect. Um, because I feel like that's kind of what the journey has been about. Is like no, I think I know who he is. I think I always sort of knew who he is on
Sure.
some level, but it was about figuring out how do I this version of him that's in the script, how do I really bring him to life for an audience? And so it's sort of like it's getting a pair of like a leather shoes or cowboy boots or something. You just need
Sure.
For me, I felt like you just need time, and then you sort of form yourself to the shoe and the shoe to yourself, and then all these things start to feel just like a really comfy fit. So I think that's what the learning process has been more about, is figuring out, yeah, how do I bring this guy to life more fully, more dynamically, more with more heart, with more humor, with different humor. That's the other thing about comedy. Sometimes things that have been really dependable laughs, they just go away, and it's not, the audience doesn't laugh anymore. I'm like, I certainly don't think it's funny anymore. And so then you kind of have to go like, all right, well, let me just get out there and wipe the slate clean and try something different. So um, it's nice to kind of have the opportunity, have the time in a run to go, okay, that's great. What else is there? What else is out there?
Right. What other pieces will connect, or what other pieces feel authentic to Ron while still establishing that connection with the audience?
Yeah, because I had done mostly regional theater before I moved to New York in my 30s, and so there you might get anywhere from like 3 to, if you're really lucky, you might get to do something for like 10 weeks, but like for the most part, it's like 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then you're out. So you just don't
Sure.
have time to like sit in it and go like, all right, what do you have to teach me?
And honestly, I would assume, like, as an actor, that almost is a blessing to be able to sit with a character for that long, to really kind of understand him, but also to get to kind of help shape him and how he's going to be presented. Maybe even
Yeah.
further down the road by other performances.
Yeah, it's a huge gift. I mean, and I wanted the chance to do it. I wanted the chance to see if I like had the stamina, I had the right kind of muscles to do something like this for an extended period of time. So I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to do that, and to like go like, yes, you can do this, and B, go, A, say yes, I can do this, and B, say like, okay, and how like what do I figure out? What do I need to develop in myself to sort of figure out the ways to do that? And um yeah, and I just feel like everybody, like whether you're talking about, because I'm trying to think. I saw 3 different people play Ron in this play before I
Sure.
was in it. The movies, obviously, the audiobooks, Jim Dale and Stephen Fry, and now everybody who's doing them in the books. It's like everybody who takes in all these different versions, whatever they experience, is like has their version of this guy, and I just hope that it's very gratifying when people I see people after the show and they say, "Oh yeah, that was Ron. You were Ron. That's who he is." And I go, "Man, that's awesome because I feel like that's so much of what the value of Cursed Child brings to an audience is you get to like see them come to life right in front of you. Everybody who you grew up with, and for people of my generation and others who have grown up with Harry Potter since then, that's a really special thing.
Oh, absolutely. And you also get something unique too with Cursed Child is that, well, I should say that there's always the argument that people have that maybe Hermione and Ron don't belong together. Maybe they do. Everybody kind of has a side. But
Crazy, crazy. If you think they don't belong together, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
And so, the question being that, like, which reality feels more real to your character? It sounds like that's the reality that fits Ron the best.
Absolutely, because I even the author at one point I think was like, no, it should have been Harry and Hermione. I'm like, no, and Cursed Child is the reason why. Like, it makes such a great case for why he's a great partner for Hermione. Sure, the teenage version of Ron is not a very good boyfriend, is not a very effective communicator, and like,
sure,
and has a lot to learn. But from the first time I saw Cursed Child, I was like, oh, this is awesome because it like shows you who this guy could become and who he becomes is like an awesome person. He's like a really well-adjusted individual. He's a really good dad. He cares a lot. He's nice. He's kind to his friends. He like takes care of them. So for me, I go like, oh, if you don't think Ron and Hermione belong together, you need to come see Cursed Child.
I will say that as a child and as a teenager, I fully believed that Harry and Hermione should have been together. I think it was as I was getting into adulthood, I was like, as you're reading the books and as you're kind of seeing the Cursed Child, the dynamic makes more sense,
Yes.
for Hermione and Ron.
Well, but also too, like when you're living in this book universe, you're like accepting a universe where everyone marries their high school girlfriend.
Right.
Which is just like, that usually doesn't happen that way. But that is exactly what happens to like everybody in the Harry Potter world. And so you're like, okay, great. I accept the premise. And then I think if you come see the play, it makes a strong case for why he's a special dude and a really good husband.
Absolutely. Before obviously I let you go too, I do want to talk about some of maybe the stage magic that's happening here because Harry Potter and the Cursed Child has some of the most incredible stage magic that I've ever seen on stage. And everybody I talk to just marvels and can't also explain how some of it's done. Some of those magical effects do you still like? They still amaze you even after all this time.
The one that kind of took my breath away the first time I saw it is actually not one that I'm sure a lot of people clock anymore.
Okay.
Because the play is so much faster paced now, and so different from when I saw it in many ways. Like the heart of the story is still consistent, but in having moments to kind of like slow down and breathe a little bit, we don't have as many of those here. So when we have them, we really carve them out. But the one that for me was so that I couldn't stop talking about after I saw it was when Albus and Scorpius have taken Polyjuice Potion and become and Delphi, and they've all become Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And Scorpius and Delphi, as Harry and Hermione, say they hear themselves coming down the hall. And they go, Albus, you got to stay here. You got to distract him. He's like, I can't. They're like, it's us. We can't be seen. There's no way to get around that. It has to be you. So they go through a door and they're kind of pushing to keep Albus out in the hallway. And you can see on both sides of the door, there's nothing on either side of the door, just blank stage. And then like a split second later, Harry and Hermione walk on stage from the other side of the stage. And the first time I saw that, I just was like dumbfounded because I was like, they were just right there. Like they were just right there. And so that's one that like, yeah, I think it's actually a little bit too good of a trick now. I think it's a little bit too seamless. Sure. Because audiences, they just accept it. They're like, well, yeah, that wasn't Harry and Hermione. That was Scorpius and Delphi. And so that's a really good one. I love the moment in Harry and Ginny's bedroom where an empty bed is brought on stage, and then there's a blanket drawn over it, and as it's drawn up, all of a sudden Harry and Ginny are in the bed. And
that's so cool.
And so yeah, things like that. I just
it's like impressive stage magic.
Yeah, and so much of what I love about talking about Shakespeare so much there you know, a bunch already, but it's like there's really not that much happening in our play, if effects wise, that couldn't also have been done at the Globe Theater 400 years
Sure.
ago. And so that I think is really neat. Like there's obviously technology at play that's used to really magical effect. But for the most part, like they had ways of doing almost everything that we're doing. And we learned that from them. And so I guess, you know, I've always felt like Shakespeare is like one of the history plays, like Henry the Fourth, you know, part 1 and 2 is kind of like the easiest, like the most uh resonant comparison for this play, and just in terms of how epic it is. And so I think that's a nice connective tissue too, is that like the technology for a lot of what's happening here has been around for a long, long time. And I think people always assume, they're like, oh, it's got to be some insane contraption, mechanism, machine way of
Yeah.
doing things. And it's like, well, no, it's just like, it's the simplest possible version you can imagine.
I would definitely say, even from my own perspective, it does feel like it has to be magic or some incredible scientific way of doing it, and not just something that, like you said, that's been around that you could have achieved simply, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, trapdoors and torches and cloaks, and you know, like just the people who created this show are their understanding of the potential for stagecraft is totally astonishing, and so many parts of the play look like a Caravaggio painting, which is and you just go like, man, that's such a beautiful picture. In addition to being like a piece of beautifully, thoughtfully crafted pop art. So it's all these things
Yeah.
together that I think, for me, it's that mix of like highbrow, lowbrow, middlebrow, like everything comes together. Incredible craftsmanship, silly jokes. It all comes together to really powerful effect.
Absolutely. So, and then one final question for you before I let you go is just, what are you hoping audiences take away from Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway?
Oh man, well I hope they're moved. I think it's I think it's such a beautiful story. It has a lot of heart, and I hope that gets over for them. I hope they're moved by that. I hope that they fall in love with the new characters, who maybe in the epilogue you only see a glimpse of, but you get to really spend most of your time with. I'm thinking mostly of Albus and Scorpius. I hope they, and I know, I mean, they like, we hear it all the time, like how much they come away loving these new characters, and I hope that there's comfort and joy in seeing the ones who they really spend a lot of time with, whether it's through the movies or the books. I mean, mostly I'm 39, and most people my age who come see the show, if I speak to them after, they go, "Oh, I just cried. I just cried," because you get that feeling of like, "Oh, they're here. They're just right there, my buddies."
Right. I mean, these were almost like my best friends growing up, you know? So being
Yes,
able to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
see them on stage. And speaking of the newer characters too, I think what's brilliant about this world is that everybody always feels so like well developed, well rounded, full characters, and to see them kind of take that life onto stage with Scorpius and Albus and stuff like that is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that moved me the most when I read the book was uh Harry in the Deathly Hallows having the Resurrection Stone, and his family, his mom and dad, being with him as he's going to what he thinks is going to be the end of his life. Um and our play has a version of that where his current friends and family are alive and are alive and are with him, kind of helping him, supporting him, bearing witness to this uh really awful traumatic thing in his past. And if and if that young version of Harry had known that that was what was coming to him, then maybe his life would have been, maybe his journey would have been a little easier. And I've just always found those echoes between the books and the play really, really, really lovely and deeply felt. And for me, very emotional because of how connected I feel to the story.
1000%. That's like such a beautiful sentiment. And it's a way that kind of it brings it all back together to what you grew up on and what is now, and those echoes of what makes Harry Potter so special.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us, Daniel. It's been such a pleasure to talk about Harry Potter and the
Yes.
Cursed Child.
Thank you, Brian. Anytime, pal.
So Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is currently playing at the Lyric Theater in NYC. So get your tickets now and we'll see you at the show.